Our first guest this evening, the one, the only WWE Georgia Championship Wrestling, GWF, veteran, the one, the only, Big Bully Busick. How are you this evening, Mr. Busick?
Gentlemen, good to be with you. And you think you could have added about 5 more words into that?
Well, we could have backslash Big Bully Busick on there, or we can have backslash
Now, gentlemen, that is a classic lesson on getting something over without somebody knowing it.
Well, thank you so much for helping us out.
I could see why you're called Angry Marks, right?
Well, that's the network we're on, but actually we're pretty. We are definitely Marks. I am definitely a big Mark, but I'm not too angry. I'm pretty happy nowadays. How about you? Are you still bullying people around?
Well, I tell you, I was a Mark back before it was fashionable, back in the Bruno Sammartino days, and when it was in territories and all this, that, and the other thing. So I'm quite the Mark myself, even to this day.
Well, tell us how you what your first mark out experience was. Did your dad take you to an armory to watch a show, or did you go to the Garden, or how did that happen?
You had a Pittsburgh station here, Channel 11 WIIC, and the host was Bill Cardell. And needless to say, Bruno was the champion, and you had Dominic DeNucci and Batman and Johnny DeFazio, Johnny Valiant. These are all the guys that I come up through the ranks with until I eventually wound up in the ring. So, you know, a lot of kids have baseball players as their sports hero, or football players. Not me. It was definitely Bruno. So, you know, just being around and watching him, Bruno was a huge influence on my athletic career for sure.
Well, very nice. I'm going to kick it over to the Morning Star, Will Huckabee, for his first question of the evening.
Hey, Mr. Busick, how are you doing this evening?
I'm fine, Will. How about you, pal?
I'm doing great. My first question is this. So what really how hard was it to convince Mike Podosis to actually give you a tryout, I guess you could say? Like, how hard was it to break into the business back then?
Mike Podosis did not want me in the business. He would not do it. He was friends with the family. You know, my ethnicity is Serbian and he's Greek. And, so, you know, there was a closeness there. He was in a couple weddings of my families, you know, the old timers. And I just more or less put the squeeze play on him and insisted that he did it. And, he let me come back down to Dallas, Texas with him. He was home in Steubenville there for a while, for a week or so. And I convinced him to let me fly down there. And, I had my 1-week course with him and Danny Bulldog Pletchich.
So, what did that 1-week training course, what did that consist of? Give us a daily, schedule, I guess.
Headlock, tie up, headlock. Called Gorilla Monsoon, booked me in Pittsburgh, and that was it. And I'm not kidding. Mike worked throughout the day, and we would go down to the Sportatorium after, and you know, and I'm serious. That's all it was. We'd spend about an hour or so in the ring, and it was just you know, tying up and just dancing around the ring in a tie up and do a headlock. And then he sent me back to Pittsburgh and said, him and Danny says, all right, kid, go in the locker room, sit down, and shut up and do what you're told. And that's what I did.
So how intimidating was it for your first ever match? You know, you're green as frog poop. Your first match is for the WWF against, I guess, was now Ivan Koloff, but back then was Billy Red Lions.
Yeah, it was Billy Red Lions. And, I mean, if you can just imagine, like I said earlier when we started this interview, you know, I'm a true wrestling fan. I always have been. But to walk into the locker room, there I have Bruno Sammartino, Dominic DeNucci, superstar Billy Graham, Ivan Putski, Kenny Patera, and here I am, this green kid just walking in. And if you want to talk about taking a deep breath and saying, oh, shit, well, I did.
Zane, what do you got for him?
Well, I just want to remind all of our listeners that this is the Undisputed Wrestling Show on Angry Marks Podcast Network, and we are talking with Big Bully Busick right now. In the next hour, we'll have Pitbull number 1, Gary Wolf, on. So you'd mentioned walking into the locker room in your first stint in the WWF, and I'm just going to jump ahead real quick, and we'll come back a little around the way. But what was it like going into the locker room as an enhancement talent when you're a rookie, basically, and what was the difference between going in as a signed performer later on in your career?
You know, when we did TV in the WWF, I got invited to go up to Philadelphia and do TV, and but again, I was so green, it was crazy, and you know, let's see, I had my first tag match was with Peter Maivia. I forget who we were working with. I think it might have been the Valiants. And then there was a 6-man with Maivia, DiNucci, and myself against the 3 Valiants. Spiros Arion, Nikolai Volkov, and, you know, I mean, guys, when I tell you green, I mean, I was green. But, you know, I got through it, and the key was, I mean, I had the powerlifting background, so, you know, pretty much back in those days, if you weren't around 240 or better, you weren't even going to get near a locker room. But the guys, they knew that I sat down, kept my mouth shut. I was respectful, and you know, they knew that I worked hard to get where I was at, or had some type of athletic background. I was a high school and college wrestler, accomplished powerlifter. So, you know, they seen the respect, and I truly believe to this day that's the only reason that they continually kept booking me to learn, you know. And then there was times when I would go up to Guido Mongols. He had a barn with a ring in it, and Dominic DiNucci. I went up to Dominic's a few times. You know, Dominic played a key role in teaching me throughout the years. So, you know, it was an evolution as I continued to learn the business. And then, you know, when you talk about going up as the bully, well, and I've said this on other shows, I was actually en route to New York, and the NWA had called, and you know, so, or WCW, I'm sorry, WCW saying, wait, because the bully, when it hit ESPN, it was a character that was well liked, and it got over. You know, the bully character got over. There's no doubt about it.
Well, so then, yeah, take us to the Global Wrestling Federation. Then being on ESPN in the afternoons, I remember coming home from school and flipping that on every day after school. You know, what was that experience like? You mainly taped in a studio, correct?
No, we taped that in the Sportatorium down in Dallas. Yeah, that's right. And Bill Eadie was the producer and booker, and you know, we had a lot of talent in down there, and I know to this day I give second thoughts because Bill had put me with Bad News Brown, which was just a tag team that was meant to be. But, you know, like most guys, when I got the call from New York, I was very excited about it, and you know, the WWF was actually my home because that's where I started, and you know, so it was one of those situations. But I always, you know, hindsight, or however that saying goes, I just wonder if I'd have did what Bill told me to do and stayed there, the possibility of Bad News Brown and Big Bully Busick couldn't have been a bigger force to be reckoned with in the world of professional wrestling.
That would be a very, very tough team. Well, so during that time though, you worked with the likes of Abdul the Butcher and Bruiser Brody. You know,
a lot of matches. Yeah, a lot of matches with them.
Were those guys rough on you since you were fairly young, or did they, since you were so big, did they treat you with the respect?
Well, you know, I know Slater was the booker down there in Georgia, and when I had my first match with Brody, and Dick, you know, pulled me aside and he says, look, he says, sometimes you like to goof around in that ring too much. He says, you better not do that with Frank. He says, you better go in there and go 100%. So, you know, that's exactly, he says, and you need to put him in there. I said, okay, I can do that, you know, and certainly that's the way the match went. And you know, Frank was putting him in and I was putting him in, and I was okay with that. I mean, I was a defensive tactics instructor in law enforcement. I was a cop down there. So working stiff is something I was used to. And then, the finish of the match, needless to say, a reverse turnbuckle. And, I hit that foot of Brody's and I hit it so hard I broke his little toe.
Oh,
we come back in the locker room. And he says, "Hey, kid," he says, "that was great," as he was holding his toe. He said, "I don't think I've ever had anybody hit that foot that hard." And I'm thinking to myself, yeah, you should have felt my jaw.
Did you ever see that match where it was Bruiser Brody versus Lex Luger, and I think it was in a steel cage, and Luger legitimately ran away from him?
Well, I mean, there's a couple, like the Iron Sheik always taught me, and Iron Sheik's a very dear friend of mine, and he says, remember Kulm, and Kulm is a term in Serbian. He says they could only see it, they can't feel it, but with Abdullah and Brody and Jerry Blackwell, Mr. Wrestling 2, those guys had more of a stiffer style, and you just had to go in there and mix it up with them. So if you had to be able to do both styles. I prefer the stiffer style. I was not much of a spot worker. Joel Beaton and the match that you see on YouTube with Bret Hart, if it was not for Joel Beaton, I wouldn't have been able to work with Bret Hart, because this stuff about calling the match play by play and spot by spot, well, I never did that, and Bret didn't do that in that match either. So you had to learn to work in it. So Joel was also a little bit stiff, and so was Bret, and I was okay with that. So I was comfortable in that type of match.
Very cool. Now, you'd mentioned becoming a police officer during your time as a wrestler. Was there ever any situation where you had a perp and he recognized you from TV?
Not up here in Pittsburgh, because, I'm going to show my age here a little bit, but, you didn't have all the internet and all that kind of thing. So it was just occasional where, I'd work the Civic Arena, Pittsburgh Civic Arena or something like that. Down in Georgia, I was a cop up here for 10 years, directly and indirectly down in Atlanta for 7. So we were on a lot of TV down there. And still the social media wasn't in. In Atlanta, you get recognized a couple times, but, it's amazing how the social media of today has kept characters alive, the way it is. I mean, you figure it's been, I finished up right about 92, been in the ring maybe 3 times since that. But, with social media, I mean, it just makes all the characters and the gimmicks stay alive. And for me, it's a lot of fun, because to this day, I'll walk through the airport and get recognized thanks to social media. So, I'm a big proponent of wrestling fans, because without them, the wrestling business just doesn't exist.
Well, while you're talking about social media, can you tell our listeners how they can follow you on social media?
Well, I mean, I have a Facebook page because GNC made me do it when I started my protein bar line. And so, and I even back, that was 4 or 5 years ago. And I said, if I really have to do that, and boom, within a matter of months, I was up to the 5,000. And I said, wow, this is just crazy. And like a mark, I'm on that thing at night when I smoke my Bully Vitamin fortified cigar every night. I sit there with my iPhone and scroll it and, see what everybody's doing. So I've turned into a Facebook mark myself.
So, and that's at Nick Busick, correct?
Yeah, that's at Nick Busick. There's a Big Bully Busick fan page, and I can't quite figure out how to manage that yet. So I don't really go on it that often, but I see when people post. And then we have the BigBullyNutrition.com.
So can you tell us about Big Bully Nutrition?
Well, and again, I've covered some of this on other interviews, but when I went to the WWF, then now WWE, we had to do a pretty strict physical. And when I got my physical, they said, no, something's wrong here. We got to do an EKG on your heart. Well, I saw, this is all crazy. I didn't pay no attention to it. And so when I went and got the intense physical, I got through it okay. But when I got up there and I started working, there was times when I'd get in the ring that I didn't understand. I was blowing up, and I mean blowing up quick. And I says, man, it can't be this bad, because at the time I smoked cigarettes. And I says, it must be the cigarettes. Then I dismissed it as stage anxiety, because, you know, getting up on. I said, nah, I don't know. But anyway, long story short, I come to find out some years later I had what was called AFib. And then I eventually locked into what was called chronic AFib. Point being is I started doing a lot of research, and I found this amino acid called L-arginine, and as I researched that, I found that's one of the ingredients they use in energy drinks. So my thought process was to put it in a protein bar, and which I did, and we took it from concept to right into the full line of products. And the arginine, you know, I would tell anybody, fitness or otherwise, just in general, if it's one of the best supplements you could take, because it promotes and reverses heart disease. And there's a doctor who I'm not affiliated with, a Dr. Ignaro. He's on YouTube there. You can watch his videos, but he won a Nobel Peace Prize on his studies on L-arginine. So if anybody's going to take a supplement, you know, and that's why they call them supplements. But I highly recommend the L-arginine, and I wound up putting 5 grams, which is like unheard of, in a protein bar, along with 30 grams of protein.
Well, and how can our listeners get a hold of these?
Just go right to Big Bully Nutrition. You'll see the website, the ingredients, everything A to Z on there.
Excellent.
I don't sell Big Bully Vitamin Fortified cigars on there, though.
You have to make those your own.
You know what's funny is you'll be surprised how many people will shoot me an inbox and say, "Hey, where can we get the Bully Vitamin Fortified cigars?" And I'm thinking to myself, "Come on, guys, come on."
All right, I'm going to kick it back over to the Morningstar Will Huckabee. I believe he's back with us.
Yeah, I'm back. Hey, hey, Mr. Busick, you know, speaking of supplements, I'm actually in training right now to enter my first ever bodybuilding competition when the season starts in March. So, you know, I'd like a couple of, a couple of free samples or a sponsorship if possible.
Yeah, I'll send you some down.
Yeah, well, good. We'll have Kevin get the information and stuff from you when we get off the air. Okay.
Yeah, just shoot me an inbox on Facebook.
Yes, sir. Now back to I wanted to go back and stuff. You know, back to around the time you was going ESPN and back when you was coming back as the Bully. During your career, you was around some of the real, what I like to call the real tough guys in wrestling. You know, we both know that there are wrestling tough guys and there's legitimate tough guys. Who are some of the more legitimate tough guys that you had the pleasure and honor of being around?
Dick Slater. Dick Slater is the toughest street fighter I ever seen. Bar none.
You got one of those amazing stories for us.
Well, I used to ride with Dick, or Dick would ride with me whenever we were going to the shows, and you know, needless to say, you just didn't want to start a fight with Dick in the street. Dick Slater's card carrying badass, but like you just said, though, you know, they call them shooters, and the guys that are shooters, you know, they knew what they were doing and they could handle themselves.
All right, my next question is, you know, I remember watching you as a kid and stuff with the bully gimmick, and I remember hating you so much. Did you love being a heel, or was it every once in a while did you really want to hear the adulation from the fans and actually turn babyface? Well,
you know, when the Bully was created, you know, it was a conglomeration of things. You know, I said to my wife, I said, okay, if I'm going to make it in this business, you know, I'd better attempt to do something now. And certainly I couldn't come off with blonde hair and the loud colors. So I made a list of all the wrestlers that my physique resembled. You know, you had Crusher Lazowski. Bill Eadie, to this day, says that my physique was a carbon copy of Bruno's. Bulldog Breyer, I had that list of wrestlers. I looked at their mannerisms, and then I made a list of here in my hometown in Weirton, West Virginia, which is just outside of Pittsburgh. And, you know, all around the Pittsburgh area, there was always steel mills. And Weirton had one of the largest independently owned steel mills in the world. And there was, you know, the city was a population of 25,000, but there were 17,000 people that worked in the Ohio Valley in the steel mill. So there was 220 bars in a city of 25, 30,000 people. So I started, all the 10 years I was a cop, we had bar fights all the time. So I started listing characters that would go into the bars. It was a big shot and beer town area. And there were some tough guys around here. But I listed them and I said, what do all these guys have in common? Well, they all wore some type of turtleneck or a hat and had a mustache and a cigar. So I said, okay, so that's what we're going to do. So we put that on there. I watched some Warner Brother cartoons, and then I had a conversation with Joe Pedicino, and I says, what? He says, Nick, you just described the bully, Big Bully Busick. And so we launched it there in Georgia, and I put the heat to Bonnie Blackstone, saying it was all her fault because I was the Georgia heavyweight champion as a face, and then we did the switch, and I blamed Bonnie Blackstone for labeling me as a bully, and so it got over quick.
Now let me ask you a question: do you think the bully gimmick would work in today's era of sports entertainment, especially, you know, with the anti-tobacco lobbyists and stuff?
The bully gimmick is working hands down. I mean, look at all the anti-bullying campaign. It's just funny. I get a kick out of it when I see it. You know, I guess I was a little bit ahead of my time. But the bully thing, one thing for sure, besides having the greatest mustache ever in the history of the WWE, nobody could say that I was the original bully in the WWE. And anybody who uses the bully gimmick after that, imitation is the greatest form of flattery. So, you know, I'm just surprised that before me that nobody ever picked up on the bully gimmick.
Zane, do you have anything else?
Yes, this is Zane again. Have you ever heard of the term hipster?
Hipster.
It's
no,
kind of
what is it?
Those kids that go to concerts like Mumford and Sons, and they dress like they're from the 20s. I think you were the original hipster.
Well, that could have been. Yeah, that could have been.
Yeah. So you were the original Be a Star campaign, and you were the original hipster in pro wrestling. So those are two great accomplishments. Now, you'd mentioned that you were rated the number one mustache, and I have a nice beard, so I love the facial hair. Can you tell us who you think, other than yourself, who would be who had a great mustache in pro wrestling?
Well, for whatever reason, at least once a year, sometimes twice a year, the WWE still takes the time to put Big Bully Busick over, and I'm grateful. I'm grateful for that. So the one year they had the 10 top mustaches ever in the history of the WWE. So I mean, there's 10 guys on there. You can go from Ox Baker down to Rick Rude to Steiner and all those guys, and you know, for me to come out number one, you know, what a nice little push out of nowhere, huh?
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, and another thing that I've seen a couple other wrestlers use the stump puller, and I don't know if it had been around for a long time, but you were my introduction to that. I believe that they called it the bully bender for you. You know, is that something cool when you see a move that was
I hated
associated with you?
I absolutely hated that move.
Wow.
Chief Jay Strongbow gave me that move and was insistent I do it. I used the hard punch down in Global and in Georgia, and the reason I hated it, first of all, it's a shoot move. Second of all, it's a shoot move on steroids with me, because even in my powerlifting career, my weakest lift was my deadlift, because most bench pressers, and I was a big bench presser and could squat decent, the guys that could squat and bench big always had trouble with deadlifts because they couldn't bend over. and reached out and get the bar. Well, try doing that. If you see anytime I put the stump puller on, you look on these YouTube videos, I have trouble getting hold of the legs. And when I finally get those ankles, I'm stretching the guy. And I do my best to get him out of it quick, but that's a shoot move.
Well, thanks so much for spending time with us. Are there any events that are coming up that our fans can see you at? Your fans can see you at?
Well, I just come back from the New England Fan Fest. I'm actually, I did my last wrestling match here last year. I was officially retired. I only wanted to do it because my youngest son, my bonus baby, never seen me in the ring, so I went and did that and had fun. I'm going to do, I plan on competing one last time in powerlifting in May out in Vegas. So I want to get that in. I'm going to do my best to trim down to 242. And then, whatever wrestling show comes around, I always stick my head. I do some MMA promoting. I plan on continuing that. So, I'm sure social media will keep all of us, not myself, all of us in the mix of things, and the wrestling fans will see where Big Bully Busick is.
So our listeners can find you on Facebook at Nick Busick, and there is a Big Bully Busick fan page and BigBullyNutrition.com. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Well, thanks so much for coming on, and thanks for not bowling us around a little bit at the beginning, but you didn't.
Well, I got a little intimidated when I heard angry marks. Last thing I want to do is piss off any marks. You know what I mean?
Well, look, they are the marks. I'm the actual wrestler on the show. On the
you're one of the boys. I get that.
Well, thanks
I just
so much.
don't want any angry marks coming down on us. Hey guys, thanks for having me. Take care. God bless.
All right.